Thanks, Joel. Thanks for having me here. And it's fun to talk to folks about something different than enrollment marketing because it's all enrollment all the time right now, as you can imagine. I wanted to first tell you that all of this content, you might wonder how an AVP for enrollment marketing can be an expert on delivering brand experience. And I do want to let you know that my professional experience, as Joel said, I spent most of my career as a brand strategy consultant. And I was actually the founder at my consulting firm of a practice around brand alignment, which was really brand delivery. So I have a ton of professional experience in this area. And I also taught a course on it at my last institution using this textbook. And I want to give a lot of credit, that's why it's big, to this textbook, On Purpose: Delivering a Branded Customer Experience People Love by Sean Smith and Andy Milligan. Much of this content is derived from this textbook, and it's available on Amazon if you want to look into it further. It's a really great how-to guide for brand experience. Today we're going to talk about 4 broad topics. We're going to talk about how do you develop your brand idea. Many of you might have an idea about what your brand stands for, but how do you align it with the purpose of your institution or organization? How do you turn customers into brand ambassadors? And then how do you use a touchpoint map to diagnose your customer experience in order to turn your customers into brand ambassadors? So we'll talk a little bit about both of those aspects. And then finally, activating your organization. How do you get everybody within your organization on board to deliver this brand experience? So let's just jump in with starting with how do you develop your brand? There are as many definitions of what is a brand as there are brand consultants in the world, which is a lot. So I like to ground it in how I think about brand. And I define a brand as a promise. It's a promise you make to your stakeholders that you have to deliver with every interaction. And a good brand promise has 3 things. It's emotional. It's about how you want people to feel when they interact with you. It's distinctive from your competitors. And note that I use the word distinctive versus different. A lot of us are in categories where the final product, a night's stay, a conference experience, is really like at its core, the product is the same, but how do you create a distinctive experience from others who deliver that same type of product? And then finally, it's relevant. It's meaningful to stakeholders and focused on where their needs meet your strengths. One of the examples I use in this a lot is, brands that sort of position themselves as doing business since 1955 or whatever. That has no relevance to the customer at all. It's only about you. You have to find a way to make your brand promise be about you and about them. And then the brand promise lives at the heart of a larger brand infrastructure. So you have the brand promise at the core, and then from that promise, you build out elements of your brand identity, which are things like your name, your logo, your tagline, your visual system. All of that is your brand identity. Then from there, you build your communications infrastructure. And ultimately, because it's a promise that you're making, you have to align to keep your brand promise. So ultimately, that promise has to define your behavior and operations. And that's a lot of what we're going to talk about today. We're going to focus much less on the identity and the communications and more about how you connect that promise to action. I like to think about defining your promise through a tool called a brand platform. Again, there are a million models for this out in the world. This is one that I find particularly helpful because it helps you identify what you have to define in order to create a strong promise. So you start with, who are you for? Who's your primary stakeholder? I have consulted on so many engagements where they're like, we're for everyone. But the challenge is if you're something to everyone, you're nothing to nobody, right? You know that line. You have to pick a stake in the ground. Who's your primary stakeholder? Because ultimately, if you understand who is your core audience you can deliver the most value to them. Then you define what you do. This is basic, like what's the service you provide? A lot of brands sort of skip over that, and you see an ad for them and you wonder, well, what do they even do? I don't understand what that offering is, right? So it's who's your stakeholder? What do you provide? And then ultimately, what we're going to talk about today is what's your purpose? Why do you matter to those people through the service you provide? I highlighted those in pink because if you can get those three things right, you're 90% of the way there. There are two other elements that can be helpful. One is how you do it. So if your purpose is defined in your what, how do you do it is the actions you take. And I literally recommend that these are defined as verbs. Build strong relationships could be an action that could deliver on your purpose. And then who you are is your personality. And I recommend thinking about these as your adjectives. Ideally, these would be ways that you would describe a person, right? So the joke I often tell is you wouldn't want your brand personality to be easy, right? Easy in describing a person isn't the way you would want to be known, but you want these to bring, again, personality. You want these to bring dimension to your brand. But these two aspects are a lot less important in terms of your overall brand potency than thinking about this, who we're for, what we do, and why we do it, which is why I kind of separate those out as the core elements. Just to give you an example, this is one of my favorite brands. I love Method, and I will, I know it's crazy, but I will pay a premium for Method dish soap in particular. I love their soap, but for anything made by Method, because I just connect so strongly to their brand promise, which is, if you look down here under who we are, their tagline is people against dirty, but their brand promise is we're committed to making the planet and our homes a cleaner place, right? So it's both about cleaning your home, but it's also about doing that in a responsible way for the planet. And then they have this perfect tagline, which is people against dirty. And then you can see here, they say what they do, right? What they do is ethical ingredient sourcing, cutting edge green chemistry, and recycled and recyclable packaging, right? And then how they do it is through, developing LEED certified plants, biodiesel shipping program, but really how they do it is by looking at their business as an agent of change, right? And so to me, I'm happy to pay $4 for this dish soap versus 99 cents for a different dish soap, because I believe so much, they've connected so much with me in this promise. So purpose-driven brands are important, partly because of your customers, right? So what does it do for me, right, is important. So yeah, it cleans my house. What does it say about me? When I have that Method dish soap on the counter versus Palmolive, that communicates something different to the people who might come to my house about my values, right? Palmolive might communicate value driven or something else. I used to consult a lot for Lexus. Your car says so much about you, and you make your decisions about the vehicle you're going to drive based on what it says about you. You might all deny that, but it's 100% true. So you want to think, yeah, the car gets you from place to place, but more, what does it say about me that I drive a Ford versus a Lexus versus a, Prius, right? And then ultimately, the consumer also is caring more and more about what it does for the world. It's not enough to just buy the product for functional reasons. It's like, what am I contributing to the greater good by buying this product versus that product? Or choosing this experience versus that experience if I'm using your lens as a parallel. It's also really important because it brings employees into the conversation. Employees are enabled to then share the purpose, right? They know why they're coming to work every day. They know what they're trying to create. They're also, if the purpose is clear, they can be empowered to deliver on it without asking permission every time, right? So if you've clearly defined your purpose as a venue, then you can say the employee has a lot of latitude in how they're able to deliver that purpose without saying, I got to talk to a manager, right? And also, they feel like they're contributing to the world. This was a big decision factor for me in leaving the corporate world and going into higher ed, is I wanted to feel like my profession was contributing something important to the world. And I didn't feel like I was always doing that when I was consulting for oil companies or car companies, right? So by bringing them in, you give them a stronger feeling of purpose, and it's kind of all this virtuous cycle.
Hey, Christie, really quick, sorry to interrupt, but it raises a great thing for me thinking back to my experience, because a lot of times people, like if you're a venue operator, people say, well, what's your mission? People say, well, it's to make money, which is true. Like that's absolutely, in all of these brands, their job is to make money. But like we used to talk about it at the University of Arizona as being, the money we make is what keeps rents lower for students living in the residence halls. Yes. And that was like a purpose-driven mission that employees could get behind, rather than just saying, let's squeeze out another dollar out of people coming. But it could be bringing in people for recruitment. It could be, investing in facilities and up. I mean, there's all sorts of different ways to create a purpose-based identity, even if your core mission is to make money.
In addition to your core, and actually on purpose, the book actually talks about that a bit. I took that out of this presentation for time, but there's like your financial purpose, your kind of purpose in the world, and then your purpose to your employees. And those are all dimensions of your purpose, right? So it's not necessarily like Patagonia has a really big purpose about like getting people into the outdoors and making that, preserving those outdoor experiences for the future, right? But they still charge $150 for a jacket, right? So it's not like they're not making money by doing that. They are making money by doing that, but those two things kind of live together as part of their overall purpose. And it can be helpful to identify that aspect of it as well. Sometimes it's really clear and sometimes it's not. So it can be good to clarify what's our financial purpose as distinct from what's our social purpose. And this is kind of a way to think about that, right? And how do you create an ecosystem that supports being on purpose? So you have to stand up for delivering true value to customers. This is that idea of relevance that I talked about before. It can't be about what we are or what we want to be. It has to be about how are we delivering value to customers. We stand out through distinctive experiences, which is a lot of what we're going to talk about today. But then ultimately, we also need to stand firm through consistent delivery, right? So it's about defining and delivering that value, making it real through your brand experience, and then keeping consistent at every touch point, which is where a lot of brands fail. They've got, I was thinking about affordable hotel brands, right? Like they have their breakfast bar, but sometimes there's like trash all around it and it's gross, and like I wouldn't eat there anyway. But if I'm a branded fan of Hampton Inn, right? Hampton Inn, their breakfast bar is always pretty nice, and it's not, it's not high end, but it's clean, and they've got people, watching the trash and all of that. And that to me is like, I know when I go to Hampton Inn, that breakfast bar is going to be a positive experience versus a sketchy one. So this might be a good time to pause for questions. Any questions about creating or defining your purpose?
No questions yet. I just put out a reminder for folks. If they do have questions, go ahead and submit them in the Q&A and we'll catch them on the next break.
All right, perfect. All right, so how do we then turn our customers into brand ambassadors? And what you need to think very clearly about, and this will inform how you think about your touchpoint map, is what the process is. A lot of times organizations make the mistake of thinking about the process through our side, right? And what we need to be thinking about is how does the customer experience our process? So it starts with defining the need, right? I have a need for a conference venue, or I have a need for a place to hold a meeting, or I have a need for a hotel stay. Then you need to certainly build interest and awareness, right? You need to be on their radar. Ultimately, then they make their selection and then they try it, right? And we've all gone to a place, we've heard good things about a restaurant or something, and we try it and we either love it or it's not for us, right? And so how do we kind of support that trial and evaluation? Then if we love it, we might go back a second time. The experience is still great. Then we start to commit to that place as a place that we value. And then the next step is, if that customer has committed to you, how do you strengthen that sense of belonging so that now they're like really committed to you, and ultimately not just committed, but they serve as an ambassador to you. They help you overcome obstacles. They help be a, kind of missionary for you out in the world. And that's really what you're looking to create. So we'll dissect this through a lens of, Starbucks, which just does it so well. And I know Joel and I actually debated about this example because it is played out, but I think we can move through it and help you kind of understand how it's going to play. So I need coffee in the morning. I'm super tired. I know about a lot of coffee places. I've tried McCafe. I don't really, it's too sugary, Pete's might be too she, so I'm going to pick Starbucks this time, right? And their brand purpose is about inspiring and nurturing the human spirit, one person, one cup, and one neighborhood at a time. And I will start off by saying we have all been to Starbucks in airports that completely fail on activating this purpose, right? So this is not something that Starbucks universally delivers 100% of the time, but it is their goal and they do strive to do it. And so, we'll give them credit for having a lofty purpose that is a stretch. So I go in there knowing that they want to inspire and nurture my spirit, and I try them. And there's a number of aspects about trying them. One is, what's the product selection? Is it only coffee, or can I get a smoothie? Can I get a tea? What's the physical environment like? Does it nurture me, or does it make me feel stressed out? How are the employees? Are they kind? Are they welcoming? Are they funny? And then what are the other experiential elements, like the music? I walk past a place right outside my office every day that just blares heavy metal music, right? And I'm not going to go in there because that is aggravating to me. But then there might be another person for whom that experience is designed that would be much better. Or they might be blaring heavy metal music because that's what their employee of the day likes to listen to, and that's a fail, right? We need to be designing those experiences to support our customers, not to support what our employees want to have on in any given day. So we think about this then commitment. You start out as an observer, right? You go in there, they write your name on the cup, they may or may not spell it right, it might feel a little awkward. Then you might say, oh, I like this place enough, or it's close to my office, I'm going to go there a few times, maybe I'll download the app, right? So you move at that point from an observer to a participant. But then you get these crazy fans. I thought this post that I just saw last week, Starbucks getting oat milk, just filled me with a joy I haven't ever known before. I just jazzed-handed about it. This person's life was literally transformed by Starbucks having oat milk. That's engagement. That's what you're really striving for. So that's when you create belonging. You take them from observer to participant to an engagement, and that's where belonging lives. Seth Godin defines belonging as people like us do things like this. So again, that goes back to defining your customer. Who are your people like us? And then they do things like this. That's how you create that kind of, some people call it a cult brand, but a brand that really is all about belonging. Starbucks really signals this a lot through their brand language, right? There, you have to order and you have to speak Starbucks in order to order at Starbucks. And then conversely, there's this coffee place that says, we don't speak Starbucks, just say small, medium, or large. That's actually a way to create belonging against a competitor, right? I'm one of those people. I'm not a Starbucks person. I just want like a medium coffee with cream, right? So I would much rather go to a place that doesn't have that fancy language. But again, who are you targeting, and what's your audience? And then belonging can also be created by listening to your customers and allowing them to generate content, products, other things on your behalf. We do this a lot in enrollment marketing at the university. We don't want to say something that our students could say better. So we're always asking them to create videos, talk about their life, tell us why they like Arizona, tell us why they like Tucson. And then we feature that content to our prospective customers. It's a much better way of bringing them into belonging than having some 50-year-old executive say, you should come to the University of Arizona because it's really sunny all day. It doesn't have the same impact. So if you can find ways in your experience to feature your customers' recommendations, our customers asked us for a coffee bar, so we added it, or our customers asked us for a great place to have lunch, and we recommend these 10 places, or whatever it is, that starts to help you create that dialogue. And then finally, once you've got belonging and you've got those people who freak out about oat milk, then those people become your ambassadors, right? Those are the people who defended Starbucks during the whole red cup problem, that they had a few years ago. Those are the people who dress as a Frappuccino for Halloween. And those are the people who ultimately refer other people. And yeah, you can create that virtuous cycle of referral and that kind of thing. But really, like, when ambassador becomes potent is when they start to defend you against your critics. So I'd maybe pause to ask, can any brands claim you as an ambassador? Can you think of an example where you're the brand ambassador? And I don't have chat open, so maybe Joel, could you share that with me?
Yeah, absolutely. So go ahead if you're out there, and you can just take a minute, type in what's a brand that you're an ambassador for and why. And while we're waiting for a few of those responses to come in, I will say that I am an iPhone ambassador, which I distinctly am not saying Apple, because as Christie knows, like, I am fiercely all about my PC, my Microsoft laptop, but I love Apple's iPhone, iPad, the AirPod, like everything other than the iMac itself, I'm just all in on, because I used an Android phone for a number of years. In part because I was like, who's really going to pay $800 for a phone? And then I finally broke down and got my first one, and I will never go back. Because I just absolutely, it is so easy and intuitive. And so whenever anyone asks me, well, what phone should I get? I'm like, you should get an iPhone. And people are like, but it's so much money. And I go through all the reasons why it's the right choice for them. So we've got two people that have already said Subaru. So to your point before, cars are very important to us. We've got Chick-fil-A and Dutch Brothers Coffee. Great customer service, affordable prices, quick and efficient. Someone's all in on McDonald's Diet Coke. And I agree, like, McDonald's drinks are the best because they have the best filtration system going through their thing. I don't know if that's true or not, but if it's a rumor, it works because everybody agrees McDonald's soda drinks are the best. Disney, we've got a Disney nerd out there. Lots of great loyalty to Disney. I'll see if we get any others. But I think people are Lush Cosmetics lately, Naturalizer and Talbot's. So people clearly have some preferences and are ambassadors and will defend to the death their right to say that that's the best product that exists out there.
That's awesome. I love that somebody brought up Lush, because we're actually going to talk about that in a second. We're going to talk about them. That's great. Joel, are there any questions at this point before I move? Okay.
No questions yet, so keep on rolling.
All right. So how do you actually then create this experience that we've just talked about, taking customers through this path towards being ambassadors. And the tool that is critical to being able to design this experience is touchpoint mapping. And so touchpoint mapping is really looking at your customer's journey and defining in as much detail as is meaningful what their path is from defining their need to completing their experience, right? So I pulled a hospitality example off of the web. So they start by saying, I need to travel. And they search and they use all of their websites and whatever, and they find the one that they think is the best, and then they purchase it. Then maybe that purchase goes through a number of, maybe they use a travel agent, or maybe they purchase directly. But then they're about to take their trip. What's happening as they lead into their trip? How is the check-in? How is the in-house experience for the, 24 hours to full week that they're there? How is the checkout experience? And then ultimately what happens after they leave? And then all of that informs whether they book their next journey directly with you or whether they go back to the beginning and start exploring again, right? So what you want to do is define in detail, this is a pretty high level one, define in detail what that is for your customers, with the ultimate goal to identifying moments on that journey where you can demonstrate that brand promise, right? On purpose, they talk about two different kind of levels of delivery. One is brilliant basics. So brilliant basics is the stuff that you just have to do to satisfy customers, but it's not particularly differentiating, right? So it's actually sad that a clean breakfast bar is a differentiator. What it should be is a brilliant basic, right? Like if you don't have a clean breakfast bar, you're just not even in the game. Versus what they call magic moments, which are things that you can do at certain touch points along the way that create those wow moments that people will tell others about. So an example that I was thinking about this morning, I used to travel so much that I was used to like every hotel's gimmick, but my husband didn't travel as much as me. We went one day on a trip together and we checked into a DoubleTree, and they handed out that cookie that they do when you check into a DoubleTree. And my husband was like mind blown happy about this. He was like, they gave us a hot cookie. This is awesome. Can I have your cookie too? And he was so excited. And it had blended into the background for me so much because I had stayed in so many hotels. But for him, that was a magic moment. He was hungry. We had just gotten off the plane. It was kind of the perfect way to greet us. And he will now always remember that hotel as the hotel that gave us the cookie, right? So and that's small, right? Cookie is what, 50 cents, 25 cents? Like that's a small thing, but it came at just the right time and it was warm and, it made him a brand fan. And what are the things that you can do in your journey? So Joel, sorry.
Well, I was going to say, it would be great if people wanted to share maybe from their venue or their event, what are some things you've done to create wow moments? My favorite wow moment I used to create was, we'd put people in residence halls. That's what you do on a college campus. But for some high-end groups, while they were at their closing banquet, we would go in and do turn down service on their beds. So we'd remake the bed, turn it down, leave a mint on the pillow like you'd get at a fancy hotel. People would come back to their residence hall room and walk into that. And it created one of those little special buzz moments that didn't cost us a whole lot to do, but really made an impact on those groups that were out there. So if you've got a wow moment to share with the group, I know people are always looking to borrow ideas from other people. So go ahead and throw it in chat.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's great. So basically every touch point map is going to be a little bit different. I pulled in one just that I had used in my class when I taught this for a fast food outlet, and I would always pick one that I knew they went to. Somebody mentioned Chick-fil-A earlier. So what are the touch points about that help the customer learn about or discover you? What happens when they arrive? What happens like in the parking lot? Like there's a restaurant I love in Tucson, but their parking lot is madness. And so I often don't go there because I just don't want to deal with their parking lot, right? So what happens in the arrival and the ordering, what happens as you eat, and then what happens afterwards, right? So you define all of those touch points, and then you want to evaluate them to say which ones have the greatest potential to deliver or communicate our desired brand experience, and what needs to happen to create those magic moments. And then which touch points really don't have the potential to communicate your brand, but are still critical to customer satisfaction. I would put the parking lot in that one, right? The parking lot is a brilliant basic, not a magic moment. But if the parking lot is chaos, it's enough to turn you off to the brand entirely, right? So you want to diagnose where your touch points fall in those. Is it a brilliant basic or is it a potential for a magic moment? And then okay. So then there are a set of rules for thinking about these brand experiences. These are part of On Purpose, the book that I recommended. So number one principle is finish strong. If you leave them in a good place, and this is really hard in hospitality because it's like they've got a checkout time, they're rushed, they feel frantic getting to the airport. How can you create an experience that has a strong finish versus a lackluster finish? The other thing is there may be parts of your process that just suck, right? Like maybe you don't have an elevator in your dorms and they're going to have to carry their luggage up a big flight of stairs. Like what you want to do is think about those experiences that just are inherently bad and are always going to be bad, and how can you get those out of the way as soon as you can? Or this fourth item, how can you help customers make decisions about those bad experiences early? So, if you check in late, you're more likely to have to lug your luggage up the stairs than if you check in early, where we can give you a first floor room, right? Then the customer knows, okay, well, maybe I should try to get there a little on the earlier side, or whatever those things are. If you put it in their hands to choose versus forcing it on them, makes them much more tolerable. You want to think about how can you combine painful steps as much as possible to minimize them, right? So if they're I was thinking about one of these, like was, when you go on a cruise and you have to do the safety training, right? They do that right away. Like the second you get on the boat, you do that safety training. They could have you embark and then do the safety training, but no, they're like, we're just going to get that over with. It's the worst experience you're going to have on the cruise, but it's done in the first hour. And then by the time you get off the boat, you don't even remember that experience anymore, right? So how can you get those painful things out of the way, and then look for ways to create spikes of pleasure for as long as they're going to be with you? You don't have to deliver constant 100% Ritz-Carlton level, amazement, but if you look for those little moments that create moments throughout, versus just at the beginning or just at the end, that's what you want to be looking to do. And then can you find rituals that are aligned with your purpose? So, some hotels like Kimpton's, right, have that nice little wine and cheese hour from 4 to 5 in the afternoon. That's a ritual that's aligned with helping you get to know other people who are guests in the hotel, that are, and maybe allow you to talk about where you're going to go to dinner, discover the neighborhood. That's what Kimpton's all about, right? So how can you create those little rituals that support that? And then if you have a problematic feature, they talk about fix it. So fix that problem or just make it a feature, right? So Guinness is a great example of this. Guinness takes a long time to pour it in the correct way. So you don't get your beer, and my husband is a big Guinness fan. I get my glass of wine a full 3 or 4 minutes before he gets his beer when we go to a bar. But Guinness has made it that the right way to pour their pint is to do it slowly. So they've made that slowness a feature of their product, right? So somebody mentioned being a brand ambassador for Lush earlier. Lush's absence of packaging could be looked at as a liability, but they instead feature it, and they like make their stores so experiential that you can see it, you can touch it, you can smell it. And the absence of packaging now becomes a brand asset rather than a liability. Even the IKEA, maze, if you've shopped in an IKEA, you have to wind through this maze. Like they feature that as part of their experience, that you sort of go on this journey through this maze. And then there are ways that, if you're really a brand expert, you can take these little shortcuts. You can see these little wavy things. These are ways that you can shortcut through the maze, but you only know that if you're really like an IKEA expert. So they've kind of made ways to feature what could be a product liability by claiming it and owning it as part of their brand experience. Once you've got your map and you've got your touch points and you've thought about which ones are highest potential to deliver on the brand experience, which ones are brilliant basics, then you want to go through a sorting exercise where you say which ones are the most important to delivering on the customer experience. They could be magic moments or brilliant basics. And then which ones are we currently doing really well versus which ones are we not currently doing well, right? So high importance, high performance, those are ones that you might want to continue to invest in, right? We're doing them well. We want to continue to fund them. They work great. If they're really important, but the performance is low, those are ones that maybe you just maintain, right? They're not so important. Oh, you know what? I actually just realized that I got this chart mixed up. I apologize. This yellow box should actually be fixed, right? It's high importance, low performance. You want to fix it. This box, high performance, low importance, you want to maintain, right? And then if it's low, just table it for a while, right? But this can help you see like, where do you really need to focus your energies? Because you can't focus your energies on everything all the time. So I apologize for the mix up on that chart. So ultimately, making your touch point map work for you, you want to think about how do you create those hallmark moments, those magic moments that are associated with your purpose? How do you avoid undermining your purpose by having hassle associated with it? How do you ensure that you finish strong? And then you need to look at all aspects of your customer experience through the lens of your customer, not through the lens of your own experience. Like, you can't let your org chart dictate what the customer experience is. You have to think about it through their lens in order to realize that goal. And then know that there are some that are more important than others in terms of impacting that experience. And those are the ones that you want to, over-index on. So I'll pause for a second. Any questions come in, Joel?
No questions. Again, just a reminder to folks that if you have questions for Christie, go ahead and throw them in that Q&A box and we'll get them answered here towards the end of the presentation.
Awesome. Okay, so this last part is how do you actually make this happen with within your organization? So it's great that you have this vision and you have this idea, but how do you bring others along in this process? So these next few slides, I apologize for in advance. I think they are better at take-homes than they are as presenting slides, and Joel and I felt like we should leave them in anyway. It's a very detailed process, but essentially you want to look at, there are 7 steps towards your customer experience. You want to engage employees in the conversation about all of these things that we've just talked about. You want to offer insights about why this is important, why it matters. You want to define the experience, design the experience, align around the experience, and then measure and continue to innovate. So, engaging, how do you demonstrate, how do you give your team a compelling reason to proceed and create emotional buy-in and commitment and alignment, right? If you just force something on them, it's going to be much less likely than if you engage them in the brainstorming around how to create this. You could go through that touch point mapping exercise with your leadership, or maybe with your whole staff. Have them all do the touch point mapping or the touch point sorting. I did a consulting engagement with a home builder many years ago when we were first developing practice areas around this. We did this touch point exercise with every single employee in the company, down to like the guys on the construction site, all the way up to the senior executives, and they were all in big ballrooms together. And we learned a lot. One of the things like that we learned was a brilliant basic is like, customers didn't want to see trash on their construction site because they were afraid that like that McDonald's wrapper might end up in their wall, right? And so one construction superintendent said at the end of every workday, he sent all of his guys around to just pick up all the trash so that when the homeowner, the future homeowners came and looked at their work site after work, they would see that it was nice and clean. That takes like 5 minutes, but it was huge towards creating a sense of trust in the home builder. We wouldn't have gotten that if we had only talked to the president of the company, right? We needed to talk to the construction superintendent to understand that as a value. The second is insight. So what are the top 3 to 4 values that drive customer loyalty, and how do you understand what they care about? So you want to think about your most profitable customers, the ones that represent the biggest returns. This goes back to who's your primary stakeholder, right? That we talked about in the very beginning. You don't want to be talking about the customers that come in infrequently or that rarely use you. You want to be thinking about what do those wheelhouse customers need from you, and then which aspects correlate strongly to their likelihood to recommend you to be ambassadors. And then again, define what they want at each point. And again, this last point, step into your customer's shoes and experience the journey the way they do. So many entities that I've worked with over the years look at it through the lens of our org chart rather than looking at it through the lens of the customer. You have to flip that orientation. Define your brand promise. What can customers expect from their experience with your brand? You want to do this cross-functionally. Be clear what it stands for, how is it differentiating, and then create concise statements. That tool that I presented in the beginning will help you with that. You want to design, then being intentional about where and how you deliver your promise consistently at every touch point. This talks about all the mapping exercises that we've just identified. How do you align? How do you prevent that siloed action from pulling you apart? And how do you get cross-functional ownership? And they suggest in On Purpose, creating work streams that are focused on people, process, products, and internal communication, and having cross-functional representation in all these work streams. How do you measure it? How do you know whether you're demonstrating real results? And then continuously communicating when you are or are not succeeding in that effort. And then continue to innovate. If you want to remain number one, you have to think like number two, right? There's a whole book about where complacent brands go, but you need to continue. You cannot stay put. What you did last year is not the same as what you're going to do this year. Fortunately or unfortunately, COVID has kind of forced us all into an innovation mindset, but you're going to need to continue to keep that mindset alive in 2023 and 2025 and 2027. All right, so that's how you think about your customer experience.
That's great. Well, hey, that's incredible information to have shared with everyone. So I really appreciate you getting through it. And I told you I was skeptical you were going to get through that many slides in this amount of time, but I'm super impressed with the way that you did that. So we've got some time left. So if people have questions for Christie, throw them in the chat or throw them in the Q&A, and I'll curate them and send them along. While we're waiting to see if any questions come in, Again, this has really resonated with me because as I look back on some of the things I did in my career back when I was the conference manager and working at the unions and things like that, I don't know that I had the right names for things, the marketing terminology, or I certainly didn't have a nice 7-step process. But I remember when we were making the leap from being a conference housing program to a conference services program, which meant that we were acting as a one-stop shop and coordinating on behalf of everyone else. We went through what I called at the time a continual renewal process, which was to look at every point of our journey, from making contact with planners and having them reach out to us and wanting leads and everything else, all the way through, getting them information and contracts signed and all that, to when groups arrived on campus, what was their experience like, all that kind of stuff, to follow up and everything else. And it was like me and my 2 conference coordinators, and then we would pull in groups of people from different parts of campus. We'd pull in service providers, we'd pull in guests, we'd pull in group coordinators, and we'd ask them a bunch of questions about what do you like, what do you don't like, all that kind of stuff. And it was probably the most single helpful thing I ever did as the conference services manager to help us figure out how we needed to improve that overall experience. And it was everything from changing who answered what phone numbers and that kind of stuff, to how we could accelerate our check-in process and everything else. And it's an incredible, it's a deep process, but it's incredible the outcomes that you can get out of it.
Yeah. And once you've done it once, then it's about tweaking, right? If you look at it every year, it's probably will hold for 5 or 10 years if you just continually tweak it. Yeah. But you have to do it once to get it down and defined, right?
Yeah. Yeah, no, thank you for, and again, I did type it in, but I'll remind everyone, I will share Christie's presentation with everyone that attended today. So you'll get that email to you along with the poll results within 2 to 3 business days. And we'll fix the graphic on there so we get the fix and the maintain in the right spot for you, so that you got that right. Someone has asked, could you remind us again the name of the book that you recommended up front?
Sure, it's called On Purpose. Here, I think I have it. I'll show it on camera. It's called On Purpose, Delivering a Branded Customer Experience People Love, by Sean Smith and Andy Milligan. And I bought it on Amazon.
Perfect. And again, that'll be in the presentation when we email it out to everyone so that you've got that. I have a question for you, just to see if we're in sync here. The parking lot disaster is culinary dropout, right?
Oh, no, because at least they have valet parking. I was thinking prep and pastry.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
But to your point, I mean, for me, one of the things that there are days where I'm like, I don't have the patience to do culinary dropout because I don't like to pay to valet park. Yeah. So I want to go park myself, and their parking lot is horrible.
Yes.
Or it's too narrow, and it's awful. And so sometimes I just
agree that their parking lot is horrible. As a former Los Angelino, where I had to pay valet to go to the grocery store, I'm much more willing to, but prep and pastry doesn't have an out. You just have to drive around the neighborhood and find a spot. So at least if there's a plan B, like if I get desperate, I can valet park. To me, that's satisfying.
Fair enough. So we've got a question that came in from Colleen. It says, overall, our online reviews are very positive, but I'm hesitant to ask past clients for reviews for a fear of unhappy clients being more inclined to review than happy clients. Do you think it's worth the risk? And how do you manage that if you do have people given negative reviews?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, one is you don't necessarily have to make them public, right? You could ask for feedback through a post-experience survey or something where you get the critical feedback, but it doesn't necessarily get posted on Yelp or wherever. That's probably what I would recommend most, is to find a survey mechanism where they have an opportunity to provide you with the feedback so whether your experience is good or bad, but it doesn't necessarily have to be shared with the world. I'm even seeing more now. I use a cleaning service for my house that emails me after every service and says, was your service good or bad? And it's like a smiley face or a frowny face. And if I say good, they say, would you write a recommendation on Google? If I say bad, they say, oh, we're so sorry, we'll get in touch with you, or tell us more, or whatever, right? So you can almost filter it that way too. But you need the critical feedback, but you don't want that critical feedback to necessarily be on TripAdvisor.
Yep. And we found, I mean, we recommend a lot of times that people look at some of those. I know we all think of them as the buttons in the bathrooms of the airports, but those instant feedback kiosks can be hugely impactful to making changes on the fly. So if you're running an event and something's not working at registration, or something's not working in a buffet line, or whatever it is, if you have that little kiosk there for someone just to hit the smiley face right when they're done with an activity, you can immediately see that on your phone or whatever and go, why are we getting a 3 out of 5 at our buffet line, and go figure it out and make changes mid-event, rather than waiting until it's all done for someone to get to Yahoo and go, oh my gosh, it was horrible, the line took forever, and blah, 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 blah. And so these are the kinds of things, again, where you can kind of work towards encouraging people. At the end of the day, they may say, hey, there was a problem at first, but they fixed it by day 2 and it was really great. And that becomes a way of them becoming actually a really great ambassador for you, to saying they heard us, they listened, they made changes, and they made it better.
Yeah. I had a great example of that. I went to a conference. So, in the marketing field, there's way more women in marketing than there are, than 50%, right? And I went to a conference where it was almost all women, and the lines for the women's rooms were like out the door, and the lines for the men like could stroll in, which, of course, women, we all know that's a common problem. But the venue actually switched some men's rooms to women's rooms to accommodate us. And we were all so appreciative of that at the end of the day, that it was like, oh, they heard us. And like the next day, they were able to make that pivot, and it just made the whole experience so much better. It was such an easy thing to do. Yeah. But yeah, if they could have just not made that adjustment, and we would have been sneaking into the men's rooms anyway, but then it would be on our own rather than them initiating it.
Right. I guess, Colleen, the one other thing I would say to you is that obviously, you will get negative reviews from time to time. And I think the important thing about them is to acknowledge them, not argue with people, or to get into a big back and forth, but to acknowledge them, and acknowledge then any places where you see that you can make improvements based on the feedback, to show that, again, you are receptive, you do listen, and you are willing to make changes to improve that for the future. We got one more that just popped in, which is, oh wait, no, that was just about the survey. So okay, thank you for that feedback there. I appreciate that on the survey. And any last chance for questions here? While we're doing that, I'm going to go ahead and just say thank you to Christie. I really appreciate you committing your time. Just so everyone knows, I mean, we at Unique Venues, we've been offering these free for the past year. It's now been over a year since the pandemic. In fact, I think we did our first one on March 24th, 2020. So I think this is like a 1-year anniversary, but know that the presenters that we bring in, they also are donating their time and their expertise to the industry. And so again, Christie, thank you so much for being with us today and sharing your expertise and providing such great information for people to take back and think about how to apply it within their own venue or their own event or their own organization they're working with today.
Happy to help.
So I'm not seeing other questions come in, so I'm going to share my screen again really quickly and just do a last couple of housekeeping notes here, and not the presenter view. I have 2 screens now, and I keep wanting to share the wrong screen. So hopefully people can see my PowerPoint again. Yes?
You are on your presenter view, though.
Am I?
Yeah.
And I swear I picked the one that said, all right, well, wait, I want to get it right now. Now I'm just like, I got to get this right. Why is it not doing? Oh, because I picked screen 1. Hang on. Let's pick the actual. There we go. How does that look?
There you go.
There we go. All right. So moving forward here on my PowerPoint, just a reminder, I went too far. Just a reminder again to people, there are 2 Unique Venues University courses that are enrolling right now. The 360-degree professional with Dr. Michael Brown starts next Monday, and Changing Conversation starts on April 14th. If you are interested in one of those courses, but budget is a problem right now, please reach out to me at joel@uniquevenues.com. I will let you know how you can apply for an educational scholarship, and we can cover some or all of the costs to get you into one of those courses. And then finally, just a reminder about some of our great webinars that are coming up. The next one on the list is next week, creating you-know-what brochures to attract your ideal client. That's our own Allison Salem from Unique Venues is going to talk about the process for doing so and doing that in a digital environment. We've got keys to a spectacular event. That one should be a great one for planners, but also venue operators on the 6th with a lifelong veteran of the themed entertainment industry, Ron Mizaker. And our next expert panel happens on April 13th, where we have a virologist from the University of Pittsburgh that is going to join us to talk about, as you resume meetings and events, what are some of the safety concerns that exist and how can you mitigate some of those things from a true medical professional's perspective. So we've got some really great things coming. You can find all of those and others on our resources page there at the www.uniquevenues.com/resources link at the bottom of the page. And with that, I just want to say thank you to everyone for attending again. We appreciate your time and your interest in the programming that we offer. And we look forward to seeing you on a future webinar with Unique Venues. Have a great rest of your afternoon and see you in the future. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.